UI, Bootstrap, and Design, Tailwind. And today we're here to introduce our newest global library, which is the Porsche Design System. The Porsche Design System is open source, so you're free to use it and use it in your own projects. If you do have your own design system, our enterprise solution allows you to integrate your own components and feed right into your development pipeline to have continuous integration with your components, assuring that your designers are always using the latest coded components available. I think that's my spiel. I just want to thank you all for first being here and giving us some time. And now I am going to introduce you over to Marcel Bertram. He is the design ops lead, as I mentioned, and the product manager of the Porsche Design System. And he's here to share some practical insights and step-by-step guidance on how to maximize efficiency and quality using UX Pin and the built-in design Porsche system. So without any further ado, I will pass it on to you, Marcel.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. And yeah, thank you for being here and sharing some insights about our application of UXPin in the combination of our design workflow, in our mindset, the ideal design workflow. But before jumping into the tool, like the session is called a workshop, so we also want to do some interactive parts that you can directly take into your work environment right after this meeting. I want to share a little bit of our mindset first, so give you some insights about the why. So basically, this workshop is called Design with Code. I'm really a big fan of bridging the gap between classic design, visual design, and the code-based design. So that's why I want to use it today. Why we actually really like working with UXPin, especially in order to improve our design workflow and to facilitate our code-based design system in both worlds, and thus improve both the efficiency and, of course, the quality and the outcome of our design work. So a little bit of my mindset about our design workflow. So what is really important that we consider actually like three phases, not just focusing on the implementation side, so implementing front ends, implementing touch points, and designing touch points. But what is also really important in order to drive the value of our outcomes is to ensure the solution discovery and to be really efficient in the workflow of the solution discovery, so that we just ship features that are validated and tested before the actual implementation. So what do we want to do? It's basically our mindset, fake it before you make it. So we want to be as close as possible to the reality and get feedbacks of our users and get feedback about the technical feasibility and also about the efforts that we have to put into making the ideas and implementing these ideas into productive code. And of course, we always want to be lean. So this phase, this workflow should be as effective and efficient as possible. So that's why we talk about both, you will see this later on, static and interactive prototyping. So let's come to the challenges. Why, for example, we introduced UXPin. So one challenge is definitely that static design tools. So static for us is like vector-based design tools, as you know, from Figma, Sketch, and I don't know if there are any other still alive, but these are more like static design tools, a really good tool for the first exploration, information architecture, and some general concepting with the use of a design system. The problem there is, of course, it's just usually the front door. So there is like, if you want to test user journeys, if you want to test logic, more complex prototypes, there's a problem if you pass the front door because nothing is at the back. So interactivity, of course, there is some prototyping features, but it's a lot of effort to actually facilitate them and make them available for the prototyping. logic part is also missing. Of course, there may be some plugins, but yeah, it's still not the ideal case in our opinion. Then there's a lot stuff missing, like the states that you probably we really see this with designers and the designers world, that some people don't even know about these kind of states. Focus state, for example, if you navigate with keyboard, there is another state of interactive elements that is probably missed because you do not include this in static design tools, because actually it doesn't also make sense because the interactivity is in general not given. Also semantics, like use the right elements for the right purpose so that we facilitate native browser features. You are just aware of them if we can facilitate real coded components. And the last part is like fluid design, real responsive design. You will also see this like in the demonstration later on, what we mean with fluid and responsive design, because like with our design system, we have a fully fluid design system. So for example, headings, text do not reacting on breakpoints on viewports, but is completely fluid independently of breakpoints, just depending on the frame or the actual window size. And of course, with all of this, the great topic of accessibility, because you need all of these elements to ensure accessibility at the end. So what is the second challenge that we realized and still facing? Basically also because of the toolings that are available for the peoples and the different roles. So there is the designer with their environment, vector-based, static, a little bit independent. Of course, we have a design system to bridge the gap, but still, as you know from the previous slide, some states are missing, some interactions are missing. So there is still some gap in terms of like communication and handover to development, and then also to the user. So maybe users, if you test static prototypes, missing some dimensions, some deepness that you will just have in real coded prototypes. But at the end, real coded prototypes are really hard to create. And the developers are using code as their working material. They have all the different states, interactions, all the stuff available. But as we have like 2 words, 2 tools, and probably 2 design systems, we always struggle with the problem of inefficiency and misunderstanding. So what is the ideal design workflow? So in the ideal world, we're bridging the gap and we only have one source of truth. And the one source of truth is actually also the source of truth for our users, which we built like the real applications. And this is not vectors, this is not images that we have like in Figma and these tools, this is code. So why not facilitate what we already have? Because we have to build these code-based components for our end users and for the real touch points. So the idea also with UXPin, and this is the great possibility with UXPin, to directly facilitate what we already have with high quality implementation, our code-based design system, is to bridge the gap and make this available from the implementation side into the solution discovery. So actually we want to be able to build interactive prototypes very easily, very fast forward for solution discovery, for example, for moderated usability tests, complete user journey testings, but still there is a good reason to still have static explorations and static prototyping and design tools. And especially about this mindset, about this ideal design workflow, we want to give you a brief introduction how we actually do this and how we actually facilitate UXPin as a tool for interactive design workflow. But before that, like this is my part of the introduction, then I would hand over to Jack again for the general introduction into the design system and UXPin.
Yeah, right on. Thank you. All right, guys. So we're going to jump into the tool. Welcome to UXPin. Just going to give you a brief tour of what we're looking at. On the left here, we have our pages and our frames, which we'll build. On the right to that, we have our libraries. You can toggle your libraries by clicking down here, and you'll notice that we have some merge UXPin libraries already loaded. We have Ant Design V2, V5, I'm sorry, MUI V5, React Bootstrap, Tailwind, Fluent, and really what we're here to talk about is the Porsche design system. Of course, we have classic libraries too. These are the type of libraries you would be familiar with from other packages where you can create tokens, um, assets, grids, and of course, create your designs. But again, we are going to switch over to a coded library. And what I mean by that is when I drag this designed component in, you'll notice we have the ability to change all of the visual information, just like we do in, say, Figma or Sketch. But that's where those packages stop. We now take it a step further, and we are able to expose your coded design systems right in the editor so you can design with them. So I'm going to switch over to the Porsche design system version 3. And here you'll notice that we have all our components listed. And of course, we can search for each component or view it in various configurations here. Before we jump into using these components, though, I want to introduce you to what a design system really is, right? Design system without documentation is not a design system. A design system is a living product that is always going to be evolving. And with that, there is documentation. UXPin actually will generate documentation for you if you don't have that in place. But Porsche does have a pretty robust design system documentation site. And here you can learn anything from the designing specs, some technical information on how to install the design system on the code side of things. But what we're really here to use is the coded components. So as you can see, each component, such as a button, has a page showing you examples, giving you usage information. Now, of course, this is the usage based on Porsche's rules. This doesn't mean you have to adhere to these rules, but they've gone through a lot of length to validate and research this direction. So you might want to just adhere to the rules that they have proposed. And in addition to that, we have properties. So let me explain to you what a React component is. A React component is a chunk of code. In this case, we call it the Porsche button, P button. And it's just one chunk of code for every button on the page. Well, that one chunk of code for most use cases of a button on any page. And by passing different properties, we're able to achieve different layouts, different functionality, and different behavior. So referring back to the documentation, I can see that there are properties associated with this button. For example, there's an icon property with all the associated icons that I can select, a loading state. Variants are important, right? We have a primary, secondary, ghost, and tertiary state here. And those are essentially what are defining the look and feel of the buttons. So here you can see in the documentation, this is the primary style, secondary style, and so on. So with that in mind, let's switch over to UXPin, and we'll start simply by creating a frame. So a frame will allow you to select a breakpoint that you're designing for, or of course, allow you to create your own. We're gonna stick here with the iPad breakpoint. And yeah, we can get started. So we have all our components here, and I'm gonna drag in a button right into that frame. As you can see here, the button now has all those properties that you saw available in the API of the component available for you to work with. So instead of clicking into the button to change its label, now I have a property. Each property has a set of descriptions and a different property type. For example, here for children, which is the label of this button, I can say, click me, and it just updates. Nothing too fancy there, but we can now go to seeing the different states, for example, a disabled state. Or maybe we want to pass it an icon. Maybe we want to say that it shouldn't have or maybe we want to hide the label and just have an icon state. And then from there, of course, we have our different variants like secondary and the ghost element that you saw. What I'm doing here is I'm acting as a developer. This is what developers do. They pass these properties to change the behavior and the instance of this button. So I'm not breaking away from the source of truth. I'm now using that source of truth to get the variants that I need on my page. I'm going to go ahead and preview this real quick. And you'll notice a few things. We have a simulate tab, and this is where you actually get to use the prototype. So far, not much excitement here. We just have a button, but I do want to show you what your developers would get out of this button. When they click on click me, they're going to get the JSX code that your component system, that your design system, in this case, the Porsche design system, spits out. This is the actual code. So there is no translation. We've gone beyond the defining paddings and all those rules, and now they're governed by the design system. And importing this component into a React project, a developer would just need this bit of code to create this button. So let's get a little fancier here because all we've seen is a button. So let's look at something that has some composition. Maybe we'll look at a flyout component. So the flyout component has an open property, which you can toggle and see what the flyout looks like. And of course, continue designing within the flyout. And I'll show you in a sec. Also, you'll notice that it actually overlays when it needs to. So any components that are of a portal type component will work, and they will work just fine in UX Pin. From here, I can continue iterating and designing. So let's go ahead and look for maybe a header component, a heading component. I'm going to drop it right into flyout. And you can see now we're using the content area of flyout to start creating a whole new experience. So maybe we'll change this to navigation, and we'll give this, we'll leave it at primary. Of course, we have our different sizes. This is all driven by the theme. So whatever theme you have loaded in your own design system, everything will carry through. In this case, we're working with the tokens that Porsche has already integrated into their design systems. From here, we can look at something like accordion. And accordion is cool because, again, it's got that state where you can toggle it and continue designing within the toggle itself. Maybe I want to throw another text element in here, or maybe I want to look for something like, I'll throw this banner in there. It won't make much of sense. Oh, it doesn't make sense because this is actually a portal component, as you can see. So that doesn't make sense to have in that flyout. But of course, we can just continue iterating on the, what we have available in terms of components. So if I take this accordion, which has two text elements and the button control group in there, I'm easily able to just toggle that and go back to our initial state, which is false. And then when I preview this frame, we'll see a couple of things. We're previewing it when we had the flyout already open. So of course it's going to be open, but here is the toggling of those elements. And of course I can click away and it just goes away because all that behavior is built in. But what will then make it we now have the opportunity to be able to prototype with these components, right? So if I take the flyout and set it as false to initiate, I can now use the click property of this button in our interactions. And our interactions are based on a trigger, a condition. Condition allows you to test variables on the page or properties of text fields, even write expressions for maybe form validation and whatnot. But for this demo here, we'll skip on the conditions and go right into our actions. And our actions are going to be quite large here, depending on what you want to do. What we're going to do this time is set the property of a coded component. So again, when I click on this button, it's going to set the property, and now it's going to show all the components you have available on your page. Of course, if you had renamed your layers, this would also show as, account flyout, maybe if that's what you named. But we're going to go ahead and select flyout. And now all those properties are available. So I can map the open property and say true. So in this case, when I click this button, set the flyout open property to true. And just like that, when we go to preview frame and we simulate, we can now open and close. And of course, all that code is available for the developer to explore. And for example, get that flyout code, which has all the components as I have configured them, ready for my developer to copy and paste into the project. One last example here before I turn it over to Marcel to show you some full prototypes is that things that were once tedious to prototype, such as maybe a multi-select field, since it has all the behavior in, we are no longer like breaking this thing apart and creating another artboard to link to and flipping an artboard. This is all code, and we no longer need to worry about those interactions. But we do have the ability to continue updating. Like maybe I want to add another option to this, and I can just copy and paste. And of course, I'm going to say hello world for this one, and maybe we'll show it as disabled. And just by adding that, if I were to refresh, I would have that new option now that says hello world that is disabled. So what we're able to do with this technology is actually build full prototypes testing all the workflows, not just a single journey, right? User journey. And do proper validation, of course. If you configure ARIA information, we can then test accessibility. And in addition to that, everything is responsive. What I mean by that is these components already have responsive nature within them. So if I look at a component such as this heading again, you'll notice that depending on the frame size, the text is scaling because it is reading the viewport just like it would on a finished product, and it knows what sizing to use based on that viewport. And of course, any of your components, if you're integrating your own library that has grids or stacks, anything with responsive nature, will work in here as well. And then finally, we have a whole array of tooling. As you can see here, maybe I want to clone this a few times, and then I can throw this into a flex box, allowing me to distribute this in a certain way. We'll go with a responsive here to fill the stage. And of course, you have wrapping, no wrapping, different distribution methods, and so forth. So quick crash course, of course, we just barely scratched the surface here. I keep saying this, but one more thing before I hand it over to Marcel. Let's say you have created this composition, and this is something you want to reuse now in other prototypes. You can go to the pattern section and save this as a personal pattern for your team. You can do this with any of the libraries, and essentially you're creating reusable patterns. You can create categories and organize them that are then utilized by the rest of your team. So you can utilize the atomic design system here, meaning all the little Lego pieces are given to you, and then you can start building your own patterns to be reused. Maybe your banner, your sidebar, footers, and so forth. So I'm going to stop this time, and I'm going to pass it over to Marcel.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the great introduction. So let's try to grab all these things up. I think maybe from just the demonstration, you will not directly get the great benefits, but I just want to point out again what you already said. So I know the workflow, and we also have our Figma-based design system and all the things. But you probably realize if you created this on your own, create variants, create different possibilities, especially like the little things, as the hover state that you probably saw with the button. So Jack was moving his cursor over the button, and you saw that it's directly changing its color based on the interactive state. So actually, for this library, we didn't have to do anything in order to realize and to make these states, these interactions available directly on the fly. Also the flyout, like with the blur effect, the animation. I don't know if this is even possible to try to reproduce, but especially if you think of a user testing with real people, usually they realize just by these little effects if you have a prototype, kind of a testing scenario, or if it's maybe like really close to reality and they feel like they're actually using the real product and they like give different and more honest feedback. But please, I encourage you not to use these prototypes for production side. It's really still a prototyping tool, although it's really realistic. And also, like one additional thing to do so, it's also a really good instrument to do some pitches, to do some presentations, also for stakeholders, for management, or also get some buy-in for possibilities, and also a great sharing tool within your product team and with developers, because like there's a lot of dimensions added that you will probably lose with like static designs and static design tools. Having said that, so maybe check. I always have a look on the time. Maybe you can scan through the questions, and maybe you have some time at the end to showcase something, or yeah, to give some answers to the questions. What I want to do now is to dive a little bit into our workflow and give some example how we, for example, facilitate the combination in the design workflow, solution discovery, implementation, using UX Bin, also using Figma and the design system. So as Jack mentioned, like the starting point, usually if you're new working with us and you want to create a new interface, a new design, a new product, then you probably can go on the public website because everything is open, everything open sourced, and you can yeah directly jumpstart, for example, with the also publicly released Figma library and the Figma design system. So if you go there, we have also like in our space, like of course the library, but we also have like these starting grids. So for example, for marketing use cases, so customer facing use cases, we have ready-made templates of the basic page layout and yeah, also some patterns of common use cases. And we also have like application interfaces for more internally productive applications, yeah, with a different focus and also different variants of the components. But if you start like with this marketing template, this is like also the workflow that we usually do. So I just opened it in my space, and then there is like, of course, the design system, the patterns, and some explanation, and some yeah examples, coded examples that we also have publicly available. So there's, for example, a shop homepage that you can facilitate as a starting grid. And then you have the possibility here to use this as the baseline. So maybe you want to do some restructuring, content information architecture. And but I wanted to show here again, of course, for example, we also have the flyout component, and you probably directly realize the difference here. So there is like the flyout possibility, but the only possibility that I would be able to do with prototyping is create different pages and show and hide this, like toggle this. But it's like a layer. It's like this what static designing is about. It's like basically images putting one of another, and also yeah trying to produce different states of these images and then combining this and create a kind of a prototype, but it's way more difficult. And if I would use this as a prototype and put in a button, probably there is a possibility to have a hover state, but especially also for inputs, you will see this later on. there is no possibility of really interacting with these components, like typing in some stuff, using these input values as a baseline for logic, for example, in order to provide a real form validation, or actually, depending on whether you found the right credentials, are able to log in and then move to the next part of the session. But yeah, still, it makes sense, and it's part of our design workflow to have this library available for the first explorations for information architecture. But the really cool thing about this is it's also supporting us in the combination of both tools in terms of efficiency. So maybe you just don't want to start from scratch in your XPin. Maybe there is a live application already existing where you want to do an iteration, as you want to use this as the baseline for further prototyping. So in the case that we created a final and a cool design in Figma, for example, one possibility is, and that's actually how I do really fast prototyping, for example, just hiding interactive elements, then creating a PNG, basically. So it's done. And using this as my baseline for working with the XPin. So I'm just pasting it. I create another frame as Jack did. So yeah, once I want to test this prototype, yeah, it's quite easy for me to start from scratch and create this prototype, just like with the back plate of the screen. So I do not have to rebuild, of course. As you see on the left side, I prepared something for the workshop. It's of course possible, and for the long run, for larger prototypes, larger things, it's of course possible to build the complete application also in your XPin with full interaction possibilities to facilitate it. But for a rapid, fast iteration, it's really a cool way of working with this framing. And then I use this frame as a baseline. And as you saw, I was removing this interactive element here. So why I removed this in order to, reuse coded interactive components in this prototype. So for this one, maybe I just again use the properties. So there's like a theme property I set to dark. I position it here. So maybe I should adjust the size. So that it's also matching. Of course, if you create the screen, it should be same resolution as the real solution, so that you can use this way of working. And what I want to do it here now is I want to use the right icon. So it's a user icon. Of course, I'm really experienced in using our properties and availabilities. And what is missing is like the hide label. And now if you preview this prototype, of course, it's still an image, but you see here, you have the real component. So I have the states, I have the hover state ready-made as it is also in the code. And as you saw with check example, for example, I could start creating interactions, for example, opening a flyout based on clicking on these elements. So it's really fast forward for me, to start not from a blank space, but like really with 80% of the possibilities ready-made. And yeah, we did this quite often for fast prototyping, but of course, some things are missing here that Jack already shared. For example, like the responsive possibilities. So as it is an image, of course, it will be cropped, and these elements are not adjusting. And of course, also other parts of the prototype are not interactive. So if users decide they want to click on menu or on the button, it won't be possible. And like it's really scoped, and this maybe then also will result in a different feeling and a different feedback in terms of user testing. But yeah, this is a good way and like a trick workaround for us. Same, by the way, applies to like working with real applications and starting not from scratch. So the cool thing also about design system, everything is code based. I can go into the repository, and there, like the template that you just saw, is also available ready-made for developers, not just for designers, but also for developers. It's like the shop homepage. So you see here, this is the coded part of that what you saw right now. And what would be possible? So imagine you're part of this product team, you want to further explore and maybe change something. So what we usually then, or I usually do, is like creating and setting the viewport of my real application. And same as you saw with Figma, for example, yeah, I can just hide this element, then capture a screenshot, and yeah, use this screenshot again as the baseline, turn it into a frame. And I think I don't have to reproduce, but yeah, same thing, coming from different sides. So coming from the real side, the coded side, taking a screenshot and use this as a baseline to start prototyping and rapidly create different variants and versions. I can also do and come from the solution discovery side and ideation side with the Figma designs and start from scratch and iterate on these things with real code and like with full interaction possibility. So this is like our way of starting with designs. But of course, I said like I already created like a fully designed, so completely within UX pin using our components and using, for example, stuff like a dummy image component, which is like a real image tag component where I can set a source code for showing images and also have the same properties that also developers have available. So it's real code, it's real CSS and real HTML. And this, in my personal opinion, so I would say I will consider myself not as like real designer, 100% designer, and not real developer. But it's really, and that's what I learned, supporting both worlds to learn the circumstances and the environment and the setting of each other. So the designers, if you work with the same material and with the same possibilities as your developers will do, you have a better understanding for their capabilities, possibilities, and also learn a little bit more about the reality of how actual applications, how actual touch points are implemented. For example, object fit. This is CSS definition, how to handle images. So probably in Figma, maybe it's the same sometimes, but sometimes it's also completely different how you handle. And the other thing that Jack was introducing is like the thing with the Flexbox, for example. So Flexbox, I don't know if you already heard of this, but it's basically like auto layout. So still there is an auto layout available. So by the way, you can also combine coded components with custom components, vector-based stuff that you know from Figma and the other tools. And you can combine this together very easily also with grouping, auto layout, all the stuff. But auto layout is not behaving as layouting for developers as with the real code. So the real code example of layouting is Flexbox handling. And it's also same properties like its distribution and its alignment, its direction. These are the same properties as your developers will later have at the end with like layouting and grouping elements. So this is a real cool thing for one hand, like the handover to developers because you're speaking same language, but also for you to learn better how to actually implement and how to actually code things. And another cool thing, so if you build this stuff completely using coded components and facilitating real code is, for example, here. I also created a flexbox, and so for the top bar thing here, and I set this to responsive width here on the right side. And for the flexbox itself, I just set space between, so separate all these elements to the full width. And the cool thing now is if I modify this frame, as you see here, not just the fluid components that we have, like the heading, for example, is directly adjusting, but also like the complete layout is fully responsive and fully fluid without setting like layer styles, variables, and all this stuff, because this is like a native feature. This is the real code. So we can directly facilitate great possibilities here. And another thing here, I had to set up an interaction for the complete frame. There is some possibility to also create some logic based on the frame size, for example. This is actually what developers are also doing with media queries and all the stuff. So the possibility here, or the idea is to switch the branding depending on the size of the window. So I created a simple interaction depending on the frame width. And if you use this then in the preview, so for example, I can use and facilitate design prototype for testing on different devices. This is like the default state, but if I would just switch to the iPhone case, it's directly switching the branding, for example, as it would be in the real world. As you see here, this is like my coded template, and it's basically doing the same stuff as why is that? As we're using the same material actually for building our prototypes. Yeah, so having said that, so this is like the baseline, the really cool things around generating like pages, single pages. But I just wanted to point out again what Jack introduced with the interaction and the logic possibilities, because if you maybe remember, what are we missing with static design tools with vector-based designs and components? It's like the interaction, accessibility, different states, and also building logics just by facilitating the default APIs and properties of our components. So that's why I also included the flyout. So if I jump back 1 second in the preview, there is a flyout available here. There's also the menu available with different interactions. So I connected it just like Jack did it with the button, and not just the flyout itself, but I also included components itself. So these are not static images. It's real input elements because it's like the real code as we have it with our developers as well. So the cool thing about this, and accessibility is getting a hot topic, is, for example, that I'm able to navigate with keyboard, and I also can press escape, which is basically the native behavior and interaction possibility as we have built it here in these components. So I can navigate with the keyboard, navigate back and forth. I can type in something, and I can easily show and hide the password without any further doings on the component side, on the design side level. And yeah, you see also the focus state that I also introduced. Probably you already heard of focus state, or now you know that. It's like the state that every interactive element has to have in order to navigate with the keyboard and see where the actual action is. And I know here I'm on the checkbox. I can press space or enter in order to check it or uncheck it. and like press the button here, for example, or again, go back and press escape without doing anything. Maybe you forgot, I'm still in the prototype. This is not the live code, this is the live application, but this is the really cool thing about when people, especially in user testings, completely losing, or remembering that we're working with a prototype and not with real coded and implemented application itself. And what you probably also saw here, and I want to point this out again, and thus in the edit mode, I can trigger the flyout open state. So the cool thing here is that we have these components available. So it's the flyout accordion. There is another flexbox thing. So we have the text fields elements, and these text fields can also have like interactions because it's ready-made. And for that one, I created an event. This event is triggered by the blur. Probably also something that you not heard already if you're not a developer. Blurred is the native element for if an element loses the focus. So if I was focusing an element with keyboard, pressing some stuff or not, and tabbing again, so this element is losing the focus. And based on this event, it's ready-made. I did not do anything. It's just building the logic. Based on that event, I said, okay, let's validate the email field and validate if this field is containing an ad, because it's an email field or not. And depending on if it's containing an ad or not, I want to show an error and set the state of this component to the error state, and also show a validation or an error message. So as simple as that, just two fields, simple logic. You get used to it. It's quite simple in my personal opinion. And by using that, jumping again into the prototype, I'm focusing the first element. So now I'm entering some stuff, but I'm missing an add. And you see the validation, the interaction is working. I go back and just press an add and enter an add. And you see again, simple, very simple form validation without much of an effort, and it's like really feeling like a real login. And I can go through this process in order for testing and set up new interfaces. So this around the great possibilities with this kind of stuff. Is there any further topic that I would like to share with you? I think like this is like the complete combination. In order to close the loop to what Jack was introducing at the beginning, what you should not miss out is that UXPin and the merge thing is combining a lot of different worlds together. So I showcased you how to make a screenshot from a live application, put it in, how to use a Figma design to put it in and to work, how to work with the components to create a complete merge UXPin prototype from scratch. But the really cool thing also is that you are able to combine all these different worlds together. So there is the possibility, to create custom elements, use custom text, as you know from Figma, for example. You can use the design system, Porsche design system library, but you can also just simply use different design system libraries and work with them together. I don't know if this in any case makes sense, but this is also some kind of reality that sometimes we do not have all the components ready in one of these libraries. Sometimes we need to put in different libraries that have different possibilities, different complexity levels and scopes, and maybe then use the material UI library in combination with other libraries and use theming possibilities in order to adjust the styling to our design specifications, so that it's really open and flexible to combine all of these worlds together in a prototype. And yeah, last but not least, the last thing, we are also continuously exploring on further possibilities. So what is also really cool, just some food for mind for the next hours and days, as it's all based on real code. So it's really real code. You have all the possibilities that you could imagine of, like with combination of different toolings, for example, in the design workflow. What we did, also thanks to Xpin in a close collaboration, but I think this feature should be also available for all of you. We included Full Story, which is a session recording tool, like for analysis, for like seeing what people are doing without making them doing a screen share. And this, for example, is able to just be part of a prototype. So you can just include this script tag. And then if you share this prototype with users for remote unmoderated usability testing, so where you're not part of, for example, you could do a very simple screen share. Maybe you could imagine like integrating survey tools, analytics tools. Of course, your Xpin needs to come up with some integration possibilities, but this is something that is really cool if you're using and thinking with the real material our users using and our developers are working with. Yeah, having said that, like this is the summary of my part as well, like showing you and giving a little bit of insight how we are facilitating both tools and driving the design workflow. And then I think we have some minutes left for Jack, so I hand over to you.
Sounds good. Yeah, since we do have a few minutes left, I'm going off script here, but I think this is important to show. We have, as we mentioned, various libraries, and we've just recently integrated our first go at AI. So I just wanted to show you if, for example, you have a design that is not a coded component, I could in fact use an AI prompt and tell it to create exact, and then I can pick any of the global libraries that we have available. The Porsche library will soon be incorporated here in the future. And of course, it's AI, so there's an art to creating these prompts. But as you can see here, it gets us pretty close to the place where now these components that were built are now in code. So here we have this heart, which is not in code, versus this heart now, which is. And of course, I can continue iterating beyond there. I can select the box and maybe add it some padding and so forth. So first use case, we go from design to code on the library of your choice. Of course, the next use case could be something like a wordy prompt here, creating a nav bar with a gradient background, place the name on the left, and so on. And here it is. This is all built in MUI code. This is not vectors. This you can go into after and, of course, start modifying in any way, shape, or form. And when I preview this, you'll notice that you're going to get the code fully of this prototype, and you can even open the code in an IDE. Finally, you can even take balsamic layouts or gray box models, right? Select that, use it in AI, and tell it to create a MUI grid out of it. And it will. It will look at your structure and create a responsive grid without you needing to even worry about knowing the specs. And finally, in some of our libraries, like MUI, we do have full theming capabilities. So when I bring in card and a button, I can also leverage this utility called Theme Customizer. Theme Customizer now will allow me to see any element on the page by passing it the different aspects, right? So my primary token, secondary token, and so on. Maybe shape border is 30, and now we've gone to a rounded state there. Maybe we want to pass it a font like this actor font. And what it's doing, it's creating the theme as we go. So your developer would have that theme available to them. And of course, if you liked that theme, you can then save it as a theme in your library, and the rest of your developers will, or the rest of your designers will be able to leverage that. So if the theme goes away, we go back to our original state. If I drag the theme in, oops, then we go back to that edited theme. Again, we've barely scratched the surface on all the capabilities. We will follow up with an email inviting you to do a full trial with us. And if you do have your own design system and you want to explore how to get that integrated with UX Pen, there will be instructions there on contacting us so I can give you a full demo and make sure we're talking about your use case and as it pertains to you. So with that said, sorry we didn't get to many questions. We will try to follow up on these questions via email. But I want to just take a moment, Marcel, to say thank you for your time.
Yeah,
And
thanks for
not only
being here.
that, thank you for your collaboration with us in understanding processes and working together, bringing new features to the platform. And thank you all for giving us an hour of your day. Hope you have a great day.